John Jorgenson here, and I'm back in the studio with Michael Schnitzer. Welcome, Michael.
Hey, John.
All right, so we're going to chat about the next steps in the process to actually get a property under contract and do a feasibility study. And the first thing that I want to call out to everybody out there is make sure you are working with professionals who have experience in the land acquisitions and home building process. And this goes from the real estate professional that you may be working with all the way through to the feasibility study professionals, which we're going to talk about next, to your builder. So we hope you're going to build with Stanley Martin Custom Homes, but if you're using this information to go about this in a different way, we want you to have a successful transaction. So the very first thing that I always tell everybody when they're working with a real estate agent is ask us for a copy of our study period language that will go into the contract. When you write an offer to build, when you write an offer on a piece of property where you want to build a home, you need to do a feasibility study to make sure it's a buildable lot. There are a lot of things that can come up when you buy a property to build a home, and we're going to chat about those next. So the very, very first step is get the property under contract with a feasibility study. So if something comes up during the feasibility study that causes you to want to walk away from the transaction, let's have the right language in your contract so you can walk away from the transaction. You'll want to be able to send notice to the seller, voiding the contract, and walk away. We're happy to provide a copy of our language, but you should vet that language with your attorney and your real estate professional.
Absolutely.
Right?
And I think just the other thing that makes sense to discuss here is the longer you wait to put a property under contract, the higher the probability that, especially as you get closer and closer towards the city, that property is going to be taken under contract by someone else. So get it tied up, make sure you have an out, and make sure you don't have any financial risk, and you can get out for any and all reasons.
Absolutely. And by the way, going back to our previous discussion, this is another reason why you want to get a construction loan approval right away at the beginning of the transaction. Because what I see all the time, I mean regularly, is that folks will go out there, they're kind of casually looking for a property, and then all of a sudden something lands on their lap, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is the perfect property. If we can get this, we want to build a house. And now they don't have a lender letter, and now they have a realtor, and the realtor says, well, I need a lender letter to write the offer. So the two things you need to write an offer are a loan approval letter from a lender with construction loan approval, and you want to have an out, right? So good study period language that will get you out of the contract, working with a real estate professional. If you have those two things, you can now quickly get that property under contract with a study period. So we have time to work with you to help you get your property vetted so you can build.
Yeah. And then just the one last thing is go in and ask for more time and let the seller come back to you. But don't go in saying, well, geez, I need a X week study period, and that's what I'm going to ask for. You should ask for more and negotiate less.
Correct.
And, John, as we both know, the closer they get in towards the infill building, as we call it, closer towards the city, the more pressure there is on the property, the more people. And so they've got, and you've already said this, they've got to move quick.
Right,
quick,
exactly.
quick. Speed is a factor.
Exactly. So you don't want to go into this afraid that you're going to get trapped into something that you don't want to buy. So the study period language, the lender letter, that's kind of the first thing. So once you get a property under contract, what happens next, Michael?
Yeah. So the first thing is schedule a meeting with us, and we will go through all the steps and a lot of different things that we will be thinking about and want you to be thinking about. So you will rely on us as industry professionals. We know the checklist of items that come up. I've built tens, 20,000, 50,000 houses, so we can do this in our sleep. But there is a myriad of third parties that we are going to need to engage to ensure that we don't get stuck with a piece. you don't get stuck with a piece of land that is either A, non-buildable, or B, going to cost you exponentially more, or even C, building less of a house on a piece of property than what you dream of.
Yep.
So there's a lot of factors in that. So number one, you'll come in the office. John, you spoke about this in an earlier discussion. We are going to want to right away get to a house. It may not be the final house that you're going to build on the property, but something that represents your dream. We're going to want to come up with a realistic price for the house with all the options. We will, prior to even doing a site study, we'll put a plug in for, as just a placeholder, for the site estimate. That, and we will say to you, write the contract with Stanley Martin. This will be a completely contingent contract, like you spoke in earlier discussions, where you have the right to get out for any and all reasons. But we need to get the contract to your lender, because we know, aside from maybe a couple things on some outlier lots, that the lending process and the appraisal approval takes so long that we have to engage, the customer has to engage with a lender quickly, because that's going to be the long lead item. So they want to get that in. Not that we may not update the price with a more reasonably accurate site estimate once we go into contract, contingent contract, but we need to get that done.
Yep. So let's rinse forward and let's rinse backward for a second. So going backward, let me just kind of recap the steps. So understand the transaction. You're going to get a lender letter. You're going to have a conversation with us. And now you've got a property under contract. You now have a lot under contract with a study period clause that should get you out of it for any reason. And what Michael's saying now is come in and meet with us. And what we say is, we're going to put the Stanley Martin build contract together, and it's 100% contingent. So whether you ask for a study period or not, we have a boilerplate contingency period in 100% of our contracts. So when you sign a contingent contract with Stanley Martin Custom Homes, you can now get this whole package together and get it over to your lender. It's not going to be complete at this time, but your lender needs to know you're moving forward on a property. So rinsing kind of forward and back. So it's the understand the transaction, lender letter, conversation with Stanley Martin, get a property under contract with the land, meet with Stanley Martin, get the house contract together. Those two contracts now need to go over to your lender, so your lender can start preparing to have the home appraised. So those are just kind of the steps that you're going to go through. And there's a lot of work and a lot of detail that goes behind all of this, but that's kind of how it lays out.
Yeah, total summary.
Yeah.
Makes total sense.
Good. So when you come, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I know we're going to get into this, but there are a significant number of lots that we see that we like to say in the business have hair on them. And so we see, this gets to your point about the out clause, so often where a customer will come in saying they found the right lot and they're so happy and it was such reasonably priced. Come to find out it's non-buildable. So I just like bringing that up all the time, because we see people almost in tears when they come in and meet with us, because they're not expecting that kind of news, and they don't even have a study period. Right. So,
It is.
Just FYI.
It is unfortunate. So I would say that when you come in and meet with us, we're going to want to get you into your study period so we can start to see if we can uncover if there's something about this property that is a deal breaker. So if we see any red flags, we'll guide you through it. So there's not really a black and white process of when we get to the customizing of the home. So when you're coming in with a property, if there's a potential deal breaker in the site development cost side of this transaction, we're going to say, let's get the feasibility study well underway and make sure we keep getting green lights. And then if you want to customize a home, because we do the designs for free, but we want to get the feasibility study underway to make sure at a high level all the numbers work before
and look
we
for
start.
Deal breakers.
Exactly. We want to find the deal breakers. So if there's a deal breaker in this transaction, you want to find it for your own sanity
Right.
sooner rather than later. So it's really for the public that we want to find these deal breakers early in the transaction, because the more time you spend dreaming about the home and the more emotionally invested you get into this particular property, the more devastating it is if news comes up that causes you to walk away from the transaction.
So do you want to talk a little bit about some of the aspects of the study period?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So let's actually, you know what, let's do that, I think, in the next discussion.
Okay.
So we're going to wrap this one, and we'll be right back, and we'll continue this conversation in a moment.